flexing for y'all. We ain't gonna do it like that. I mean, I know how that money come. You know what I'm saying? My song is the state song. Georgia's the state song.
We had a song with Ludacris. So one day I'm at the crib, right? And I'm watching MTV. How you gonna debut my shit that ain't even there? After you steal my shit, and I write certain songs for you, and then you get a Grammy for a song.
I can't believe people believe people. Like, man, I hear on every record that Chris do, I hear him rap about how many records he sold, how much money he got. Well, why are you stealing from me?
Ludacris, mainstream icon, platinum artist, and head of Disturbing That Piece. But behind the success of his label, some artists still left out of frustration at being iced out, forgotten, silenced.
DTP taught me, though, that, hey, man, they'll smile in your face just to jump on your hot song, and then they'll throw you in the tax write-off section, you know what I'm saying? And that's cold-blooded. Shout out to the people at DTP that I love and got love for. And even shout out to them for what they did. Because at the end of the day, I ain't bitter.
Field Mob, a southern duo known for their lyrical chemistry and down south storytelling, were once signed under Ludacris's label. But their story didn't end with stardom. It ended with frustration, blocked opportunities, and missing money.
Field Mob's never had a solid record deal.
Yeah.
Everything we did, we probably one of the only groups that never had payola.
They weren't just sidelined. Some say they were blackballed, creatively erased from their own success. And the hit that should have taken them mainstream, it got credited to someone else.
I have fun with DTP. I'm pretty sure a lot of people be hearing about me and Ludacris going whatever back and forth. He's a sneak disser.
The tension between Ludacris and Field Mob started with one major turning point: Georgia. To the public, it seemed like a collaborative win. Ludacris, Field Mob, and Jamie Foxx, all under the Disturbing Thaw Peace banner. But behind the scenes, Field Mob felt like they were being erased from their own creation. According to multiple interviews, Field Mob claimed Georgia was their track from the start. They say they brought the idea, laid the verses, structured the sound. And Ludacris came on later as a feature. But when the final release came out, the song was promoted as Ludacris featuring Field Mob and Jamie Foxx. In the eyes of fans and media, it looked like a Ludacris song.
MTV debuting Georgia. How you debuting my song and I'm at home? That's weird. I wanted to meet Carson Daly too. Let me get some of that white money, you feel me?
And the problems didn't stop there. Field Mob said they were never even told when the music video was going to drop. One day they turned on the TV and saw the Georgia video playing on BET. Nobody called, nobody gave them a heads up. And when they saw it, they realized that they were barely shown in the video at all. In their words, it felt like they were being phased out of their own moment. But what really pushed things over the edge was the Grammy situation. When Georgia was nominated for an award, Ludacris performed it solo, without Field Mob. They weren't invited, consulted, or even acknowledged on stage. To them, that confirmed what they had feared. Ludacris was taking full credit for the song while they were being left out of the picture.
And the winner for the best rap album goes to Ludacris is your year, baby!
One more time. Hold on, wait. Special shout out to Oprah and special shout out to Bill O'Reilly. I love you. This goes out to my father. This goes out to my father.
They didn't expect special treatment. They just wanted what felt fair. If they helped create the song, they wanted to be treated as part of it. Instead, they say the business and recognition were handled without them. And to make it worse, there were no clear explanations, no conversations, just silence. Now, there are no official documents showing who owns the master to Georgia, and no legal disputes have been made public. So while the legal side of the situation is murky, the emotional and professional fallout was clear. Field Mob felt like they were being pushed to the side on the very song that could have launched them to a new level. And despite the frustration, they stayed. Why? Contracts. Field Mob were signed to Disturbing That Piece under a multi-album deal, and that deal was tied to Def Jam South. Leaving wasn't an option, at least not without major legal trouble. So they held on, hoping things might get better. But that moment, the release of Georgia, marked the beginning of what they say became a long pattern of being left out, underpaid, and undercut. And as time went on, the frustration grew into something much deeper, because not only did they say they were excluded from the spotlight, they also say they were never properly paid for it either.
Field Mob's never had a solid record deal.
Yeah.
Everything we did, we probably one of the only groups that never had payover.
After the claims about Georgia and feeling shut out of their own label, Field Mob says the next phase hit even harder. They were being blackballed. They've spoken openly in interviews about how, not long after their issues with Ludacris became clear, industry opportunities began to dry up. Shows they were once getting booked for stopped coming in. Collaborations that were being discussed quietly disappeared. According to them, it wasn't a coincidence. Sean J said in one interview that they were hearing things behind the scenes, calls being made, quiet warnings being passed along. In his words, it felt like a quiet campaign to keep them out of certain rooms. Now let's be clear, no evidence has ever surfaced of Ludacris directly blackballing them. There are no emails, no leaked calls, no public statements confirming that. But Field Mob strongly believes that someone with power was making it harder for them to move forward, and they tie that directly to their fallout with DTP. This is where things shifted from just disappointment to actual damage, because the music industry is built on connections. If key people stop returning your calls or if labels won't take a meeting with you, your momentum dies fast. And Field Mob says that's exactly what happened. They also mentioned specific incidents, like being blocked from red carpet events or award shows, being left off guest lists, or having major platforms stop inviting them. None of it came with an explanation, but the timing to them said everything. And they weren't the only ones. Other former DTP artists have suggested similar experiences. Shauna, another artist signed under Ludacris, also said she was blocked from performing at the BET Hip Hop Awards after she left the label. While she didn't directly say Ludacris was behind it, fans and insiders connected the dots, especially after she hinted that it was someone from my former label.
Mike pulled me to the side, Mike, who's my manager, pulled me to the side and explained that the PR person had been contacted by BET personnel and had been instructed.
But what makes her case especially important is that she never publicly beefed with Ludacris. There was no diss track, no public drama, and yet the alleged blackballing still occurred. That subtlety gives her claim more weight. It didn't come from personal conflict. It came from professional fallout.
To get slapped in the face like that by Shaka and Ludacris was just kind of crazy, man. I just really didn't even understand it. I needed to get some answers.
And then there's Chingy, who was loosely affiliated with DTP through Def Jam South. He had his own set of issues with Ludacris and the label's internal politics. In a 2013 Vlad TV interview, Chingy said, "I didn't like how things were handled. You don't treat artists like that when they help you win." He later clarified that he had no personal beef with Ludacris himself, but the management and decisions made during that era left him feeling disrespected and sidelined. Even I-20, one of the more loyal DTP members, admitted in old interviews that things weren't always smooth behind the scenes. While he never accused Ludacris of blackballing him, he hinted that once the machine wasn't behind you, it became hard to get traction, even if you were still technically part of the crew. So when Field Mob said they felt iced out, it didn't sound like a unique experience. It sounded like part of a pattern. Artists who helped build the label suddenly found themselves shut out once the business or personal dynamics changed. But unlike others, Field Mob didn't let it go quietly. They brought it to the surface through interviews, freestyles, and studio sessions. And while they never released a full diss track, the energy in their music made their position clear. They felt betrayed, overlooked, and ultimately erased from a chapter of Southern rap they helped write. To them, it wasn't just business, it felt personal. As the doors kept closing, Field Mob turned back to what they knew: raw, unfiltered music. They started putting out tracks aimed at telling their side of the story, not diss records for clout, but responses. Records that gave voice to what they'd been holding in. And one of those tracks was aimed directly at Ludacris. That's where we go next.
This is who starts saying disturbing the peace was stealing from me. Not me. I never said that. The lawyer made that statement.
That wasn't just a one-time complaint. Field Mob has said in multiple interviews that the Georgia situation wasn't just about credit, it was also about money. According to them, the financial side never matched what the song actually accomplished. They claim they didn't receive proper compensation for what became one of the biggest tracks associated with their name. And with no lawsuit or official public accounting, it's hard to verify who got what behind the scenes. But Field Mob's message has stayed consistent. We helped build it, but we didn't benefit from it. And from their perspective, it wasn't just Georgia. They've implied that financial transparency was a broader issue while signed to Disturbing That Peace. Decisions were being made by the label, not by them, and they say that left them in the dark about royalties, rights, and revenue splits. What hurt more, though, was that Georgia was supposed to be their breakout moment. It had commercial success. It had a major feature with Jamie Foxx. It had Grammy attention. But they say they didn't just lose visibility. They lost the paycheck that should have come with it. They felt like they were being managed, not partnered with. As artists who came up grinding in Albany, Georgia, they were used to being independent. But under DTP, they say the business was centralized, the communication was minimal, and the decisions were made without their input. Again, there are no court filings, no public royalty disputes, no leaked contracts. But the consistent story they've told is that after Georgia hit big, they never saw what they believed they earned. Not in exposure, not in respect, and not in revenue. And it didn't end there. Because in the years that followed, Field Mob started speaking up, not just about money, but about creative contributions too. In fact, they went as far as to say that they weren't just making their own songs, they were ghostwriting for Ludacris himself. As the fallout with Ludacris continued, Field Mob started shedding light on what they say really happened behind closed doors, especially when it came to writing. In interviews, Sean J claimed that Field Mob didn't just make their own music, they also ghost wrote for Ludacris. That's not unusual in the industry, especially when artists are juggling acting careers, touring, or building a label. But for Field Mob, it added another layer to their frustration. They felt like they were being used behind the scenes while being left out in public. Now, to be clear, Ludacris has never publicly confirmed or denied that Field Mob wrote any material for him. There's no paperwork, no liner notes, no official credits to back it up. But the claims from Field Mob have been consistent over time. According to them, they provided hooks, verses, and even entire flows, only to see the final product drop with their names nowhere in sight. And Sean J didn't hold back. In one of his interviews, when asked about the tension, he challenged Ludacris directly. "If you got something to say it to my face."
Say it to my face. Yeah, say it to my face. Yeah.
It wasn't just about business, it had become personal. They felt their creative contributions were erased, and instead of a conversation, they got silence. No phone call, no public acknowledgement, just distance. So while none of these claims have been legally confirmed or officially addressed, the consistency in Field Mob's story, combined with similar experiences from other DTP artists, continues to raise questions about what was really going on behind the scenes. Field Mob believed their pen was part of what made DTP Records hit, but the praise and spotlight weren't coming back their way, and that built resentment. Especially when they say they weren't getting paid fairly to begin with. Ghostwriting in hip-hop has always had a complicated reputation. Some artists embrace it, others deny it at all costs. But when the writers themselves start talking publicly, it can shift how fans see the relationship. In Field Mob's case, they say they stayed quiet about it for years out of respect. But once they felt they'd been shut out of opportunities, misrepresented on projects, and underpaid for their biggest song, that silence faded. At this point, it wasn't just about the Georgia video or missed royalty checks. It was about the bigger picture, how they felt pushed out of the label they believed they helped build. And the longer they stayed silent, the more the story seemed to favor Ludacris. So they started to speak up, not just in interviews, but in the music itself. Because once the ghostwriting talk came out, things turned into full-blown disses. After being silent for so long, Field Mob started doing what they do best, responding through music. For them, it wasn't about a Twitter rant or an Instagram live session. They went back to the booth. They released a series of tracks that, while not officially labeled as diss records, clearly addressed their time under Disturbing That Piece. And one figure came up repeatedly, Ludacris. They didn't hold back in these verses. They talked about being sidelined, having their music taken, and being cut out of business decisions. And even though they didn't name names in every line, the message was obvious to anyone following the story. The lyrics weren't about clout or headlines. These were records meant to clear the air. To Field Mob, they had been misrepresented, blackballed, and quietly pushed out of a label they helped bring credibility to. And the only way to regain control of that narrative was to rap about it. But what made things even more tense was that Ludacris responded, not with an interview or a direct statement, but through a subliminal verse on a future song. Field Mob took it personally. According to them, that was a clear shot. Whether it was meant to be or not, they heard it as a direct response to their claims, and it added fuel to the fire. From their point of view, they had been blacklisted, left out, and now publicly mocked. They fired back in their own lyrics, pointing out what they felt was hypocrisy. They said they stayed quiet out of loyalty but were met with silence, then shade, then erasure. By this point, any possibility of reconciliation seemed off the table. Still, the situation never escalated beyond the music. No lawsuits, no confrontations, just bars. But in hip-hop, that's enough to change how fans view history. To many listeners, this all happened quietly. There was no huge public beef, no radio blow-ups. But for Field Mob, it wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a slow unraveling of trust and a label relationship that never played out the way they hoped. And even with the music out there, the damage was already done. They didn't want revenge, they wanted recognition. But what they got was silence, and then, eventually, a joke at their expense. Next, we look at where things stand today, and whether Field Mob ever got the industry respect they feel they earned. Years after the fallout with Ludacris and Disturbing Thought Piece, Field Mob's presence in the mainstream faded. They never announced a breakup, and they never stopped making music completely. But things clearly slowed down. Sean J has been the more vocal of the two, occasionally doing interviews and popping up on platforms like The Raw Report and YouTube podcasts. He's remained open about the group's history, often revisiting the Georgia incident, the writing contributions, and the label politics they say led to their quiet exit from the industry. Smoke, the other half of the group, has mostly stayed low-key. He still raps occasionally, and at one point hinted at a solo project, but he's kept a much smaller public profile than Sean. The group has also hinted a few times at a reunion project. Some snippets and underground tracks have surfaced over the years, but nothing official has charted or gone viral. For many fans, Field Mob is still remembered as one of the most original Southern rap duos to come out in the early 2000s, but their momentum was never fully restored after the DTP fallout. As for Ludacris, he's moved in a different direction entirely. Acting became a major part of his brand, with roles in the Fast and Furious franchise and other film projects. He's still respected in hip-hop, but he rarely addresses past artist relationships, and has never spoken publicly about the Field Mob situation. There's no public record of a reconciliation, no formal acknowledgement of the ghostwriting claims, no apology or counterstatement from Ludacris. The story for the most part remains one-sided, told from Field Mob's perspective in interviews, lyrics, and reflections, and that's how it stayed. Despite the tension, Field Mob has never taken the nuclear route. No lawsuits, no public smear campaigns, just music, memories, and a quiet sense of what could have been. They haven't ruled out returning, but they've also made it clear, if it happens, it'll be on their own terms. No middlemen, no label politics, no diluted vision. Whether or not the industry gives them their flowers, Field Mob's impact is hard to erase. Their southern sound, sharp pen, and storytelling approach helped define a moment in hip-hop. And even if they never hit the heights they could have under DTP, their story still matters. Sometimes the music tells the truth that business won't. The Field Mob and Ludacris situation never had a big ending. No public falling out on stage. No Instagram beef. No diss tracks that went viral. But what it did leave behind was a quiet fracture between what fans thought was happening at Disturbing Thought Piece and what was really going on behind the scenes. Field Mob came into the label with talent, credibility, and a clear Southern identity. They were different. Country, unapologetic, lyrical, and raw. They added texture to the DTP roster, but somewhere along the way their momentum stalled. Was it miscommunication? Was it label politics? Was it personal tension with Ludacris? We may never know every detail. What we do know is that Georgia, a song that could have pushed Field Mob into mainstream success, instead became a moment of division. It's the song most people associate with them. But ironically, it's also the moment they say they lost the most. The blackballing accusations remain unproven, but the pattern they describe lines up with what other artists have said. And while Ludacris has chosen not to respond, the silence itself has left a space that Field Mob filled with their own story. And here's the thing. This isn't about painting one side as the hero or the villain. It's about showing how the music business, especially at the label level, often leaves artists with stories that never get fully told. It's about power dynamics, creative control, and what happens when the spotlight isn't shared equally. Field Mob may never fully return to the industry the way they once imagined, but the interviews, the lyrics, and the raw honesty they've given in the years since have kept their voice alive. They were never just background players. They were part of that early 2000s Southern wave. And whether they're recognized on award stages or not, their impact still echoes in how Southern rap evolved, and how stories like this keep pushing conversations about credit, ownership, and respect. No shoutouts, no burnt bridges, just one final message from two artists who still believe their story deserves to be heard. Okay, that will be all for now. Don't forget to like, share, and comment. Goodbye.